All right. Hey, Maddie, thank you for taking the time to make a little recording here. Looking forward to hearing a little bit about you, but also to talk about harm reduction, because I think that's an area that everybody probably could use a little bit more information on. So, do you want to start with just kind of telling us how you got to this place in your career and kind of what your special interests have been?
Yeah, of course. So I have a lot of background in addictions work. I did some inpatient treatment in my graduate school and did outpatient substance use treatment when I was getting my provisional licensure done and a little bit after that. And I saw, varying success with traditional treatment models. Actually had some experiences where clients I had worked with passed away from their addiction.
Mm.
And so when I learned about harm reduction, I was really curious about it because I was seeing that maybe for some folks, traditional treatment wasn't the best option for them. But what else could they try? And so that's really kind of where I learned about harm reduction and very quickly fell in love with it. And can talk a little bit more about why I love this approach so much as we continue.
Cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that highlights one of the things that we focus on a lot here at Heartland is that tailored approach to really meet clients where they are and not just like, oh, you have an addiction, here's the deal, but to really work with people to understand what's going to work for them, not just how we think it ought to go, perhaps.
Right.
Um, so maybe if you want to first start with anybody who might be unfamiliar with the term, can you explain what harm reduction is?
Yeah, harm reduction at its most basic just means, making people's life safer by reducing harm. When people first learn about it, they think it's kind of giving the green light, encouraging risky behaviors, and that's not really the case. It's
Mm-hmm.
just more so about, understanding recovery takes time and looks different for each person. So, like you were saying, really tailoring the approach that we work with them. It helps people stay safe and stable in the immediate future. And I really, really like this approach because it's very person centered and it values individuals' dignity and autonomy. And that can be
Mm.
often something that's lacking in more traditional treatments.
Sure.
Can be kind of a little condescending of, the provider, know better than you, and therefore you need to do what I ask.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I think, a lot of people understand recovery. It's like, okay, so you have to be sober. It means no more. And that's how that works, that it's totally sober. Is that true, first of all? And is that realistic?
Yeah, I mean, first, I always like to say that addiction is a brain disease. Not a lot of people are familiar with that, meaning that it can't just become like overcome with sheer willpower. And
Mm,
yet,
hmm.
that has been the message that so many people struggling with addiction have been given. They're told to just push through. If you work the program, you'll see results. And in truth, someone can be doing absolutely everything right and still relapse. And so, then they're then blamed. They're told you're not trying hard enough. You don't want this enough.
Mm, hmm.
And then feelings of shame start to come up. And then we're
Totally.
coping with that shame with more substances. So it's a really
Right.
nasty cycle that can be really difficult to break. I'm much more of a fan of saying recovery can be self defined. So I'm not going to tell you what your recovery means for you.
Okay.
And that often leads to more intrinsic motivation to work on their recovery than the extrinsic motivation, meaning they're working on it because they genuinely want to. It's something that they're motivated from within to pursue versus some
Hmm.
external person or circumstance telling them that they need to be
Right.
in recovery. That's not to say that some people, their recovery means being totally sober. It totally can, and there's a lot of people in that space. But for those that is not working or that's just not where they're at, this does offer a different path for them, which I really love.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think having options and that there's not only one right way to work on the things in your life that you want to work on. So it feels really intuitive to me in that way. But also, like you said, it's not the way that people are generally approach recovery. It's like very
Right.
black and white or all or nothing. Um, what does harm reduction look like when you're in session? Like if somebody comes and says they want to look at this, maybe how does that going to unfold so people know what to expect?
Yeah. In session, it really looks like the therapist and the client collaborating on ways to lower risks. and really unique and personalized way. So oftentimes, I've talked to people about how are you using substances, and if you're using them alone, can we change that behavior? As
Mm.
it's really really dangerous to use alone, because if you start to overdose, there's no one there to save you. So can we make a plan to only use around other people? Can we download apps? And there's more than one app out there that
Okay.
you can actually call someone while you're using. They'll stay on the phone with you throughout. And if you start to overdose, they will call 911 on your behalf.
Wow. Okay.
It's a really, really cool app.
Yeah.
If they reuse needles, hey, let's find you a safe needle exchange. If you're using 6 times a day, can we just try to use 5? Can we use 5 times a day? So it's really personalized. And this happens at the client's place, treating them as the experts in their lives.
Hmm.
They know, hey, I never use alone, but I do reuse needles. So let me work on that behavior or something.
Hmm.
It's really more about me exploring options, sharing ideas, connecting them to resources, not making the decisions on their behalf.
Right. I hear so much also like respect and dignity in that instead of just the straight up, you have to stop. And why would you keep doing this? You're hurting the people that you love or that love you or whatever. And that difference, I assume, has to make all the difference for client experiences because obviously shameful feelings are not what generally drive change or make people want
Sure.
to keep coming to therapy.
Yeah.
Um, is it the case that harm reduction could lead to total sobriety? Does that happen?
Yeah, it absolutely can. I mean, we see this in non-addiction concept or areas too, like small changes leading to big changes. When we decide we go on a diet, for example, we don't usually start with a total overhaul of our diet. We usually start with
Right.
singular choices. Hey, at dinner tonight, I'm going to have water instead of soda. Hey, I'm going to have steamed vegetables instead of fried. Those small changes, are really helpful. They let people go
Hmm.
at their own pace and help them feel more empowered and capable over time, instead of just kind of expecting this like overnight change where you change all of these habits and behaviors and routines. At some point in their journey, while they're making those small changes with harm reduction, they may feel ready to pursue complete sobriety. That's an awesome outcome, but it's never really kind of the main goal that I'm pursuing. I'm never saying I'm going to do harm reduction with this person so eventually they can be sober. Really,
Right.
my goal with harm reduction is I want to keep this person safe. I want to keep this person alive.
And it sounds too like so much, like I said, respect and regard for where they want to go and where
Yeah.
they're trying to get. Do people come in? This is sort of just off off script, I suppose, but like, do people come in with what kind of goals usually? Do people come in asking for help with like total sobriety, or is it like maybe there's a problem? I kind of feel like I should look at this. What are you seeing in your office?
Yeah, I would say in the realm that I'm working at now, there's more people wanting that type of personalized
Mm-hmm.
care. When people are going to traditional addiction treatment places, harm reduction isn't necessarily an option, or it's not something their clinicians are
Right.
trained in. Um, so yeah, it's something that I'm seeing more so now as I've kind of stepped into more of the realm that Heartland Therapy Connection is in. But I would really love, I mean, more addiction practitioners to adopt this approach, to get the training, but baby steps, of
Yeah.
course.
Excellent. Yeah, you have training. This
Great.
is an official training. Tell us what the credentials are, kind of what that process is for training, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. So it is a credential that I have. It's called Harm Reduction Specialist. And it was a training that I received from the Missouri Credentialing Board. They offer a variety of substance use credentials, just being one of their newer ones. And they have some really awesome trainings out there. So I highly recommend MCB, Missouri Credentialing Board. But I believe it was a 3-day training that I did,
Okay.
like 8 hours a day, working with a variety of other professionals. So we had peer support specialists in there, caseworkers, therapists, really kind of anyone who's in addiction adjacent work was welcome to go and get this training, which I also thought it was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But really taught us about exactly what we're talking about today, valuing individuals' dignity, their autonomy, keeping them safe by making choices that feel genuine and authentic to them, versus saying like,
Mm-hmm.
I know best and I'm going to tell you the changes you need to make in my life. And
Right.
so that was a really cool training, and something that I think maybe is missing in a lot of mental health trainings, of like really poising the client as the expert instead of us, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
I love kind of shifting that power imbalance in the therapy space.
Just another question in this sort of like official training capacity of this, or how it gets applied. What kind of maybe substances or areas of addiction does this apply to?
Yeah, I really don't think there's one specific thing. You
Mm-hmm.
can do harm reduction when you're using alcohol, when you're using illicit drugs, when you're using tobacco. There, it's to me, it's more of a philosophy than necessarily like a regimented treatment.
Got it.
And so you
Mm-hmm.
can really apply it to a lot of different things, even non substance use addictions too.
Okay, so like behavioral, gambling,
Sure.
porn,
Yeah.
all
Yep.
that, all the
For
things.
sure.
Okay, cool. What would you say to partners, loved ones, family members about someone who is practicing harm reduction instead of sobriety? Because I have to imagine, I mean, obviously, sobriety is kind of the message that we get about addiction. Like the only option is to be totally sober. And so when family members are coming with that agenda and their loved ones are like, maybe harm reduction, and you're obviously supporting that goal, how does that get addressed with people in their lives?
For sure. I think it's very frightening to think about someone you care about still using. That fear is real, that fear is understandable. And at the same time, the risk of them being trapped in the addiction cycle or overdosing is also very real and sometimes even more dangerous. I like to talk to a lot of people about the risk of relapse
Mm-hmm.
causing fatality is like if you have a period of sobriety, the tolerance that you had built up during active addiction is decreasing. And so, let's say I have 90 days of sobriety and I go out and use again. I think I need the same amount of things to get me
Right.
intoxicated as before. I actually don't. And so I'm
Uh-huh.
taking an excess of information of substances for a tolerance I no longer have, and that's how people are dying.
Yeah, that makes a lot
So
of sense.
that can be the risk of saying you need to be totally sober without the resources, connections, support tools to actually maintain that sobriety. I think that's causing a lot of deaths. So that would
Mm-hmm.
be something I would emphasize to loved ones of like harm reduction can actually be the safer route. It sounds
Sure.
counterintuitive, for
Right.
sure. And loved ones clearly care and they want the best for their loved ones. And they've heard those messages that sobriety means safety, that you
Yeah.
have to be sober in order to not be in danger. And that's just not true. That's not true for a lot of people. Harm reduction, as I said before, my main goal is keeping people safe, keeping people alive.
Mm-hmm.
That path just looks a little different than maybe we expected at the get.
I think that's super interesting that because definitely that is in my mind of like sobriety means safety, which I think at face value is probably true, but not if you've had built up that tolerance like you're describing to where if you get sober then and that's what I mean I've known that for a long time in terms of people going back to the previous level of use and then that's where real big problems can occur.
Or with the way that illicit drugs are consumed, you often don't know the dosage. You don't know how potent things are because of
Mm-hmm.
the way that these substances are consumed. So even if you know, hey, I've been sober, I'm going to relapse, you can have the best of intent to not take as much. And this is a really potent batch where
Mm-hmm.
more fentanyl is in it than you're expecting, and you die, even if you've done everything
Right.
right.
Yeah, right.
So that can be the really scary reality for a lot of folks.
Yeah, no kidding. And we talked a little bit about this, but will you speak a little bit more about how do you know that like harm reduction is for you? Or what would be somebody who hears this or is kind of questioning, sober, curious? I feel like at this point in time, a lot of people have considered drinking less and how do you know when it's like time to talk to a professional to come talk to you about this?
Yeah, of course. I would say harm reduction can be used at any stage in addiction. And like I said earlier, it can be helpful for other issues, behavioral addictions like gambling, risky behaviors, really any situation where somebody knows something's not working, but I'm not willing or ready to get rid of that completely.
Right.
Um, harm reduction for me, when I'm listening to, is someone who feels like maybe their behavior's not that bad. Hey, I'm not drinking every
Hmm.
single night of the week. I'm drinking really heavily on the weekends. or yeah, I'm drinking a lot, I'm drinking most nights, but I'm just really not ready to give that up. Those are individuals that typically will not seek out traditional treatment, or they will not
Mm-hmm.
qualify for traditional
Mm-hmm.
treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I was doing that addiction work, if someone did not meet the diagnostic criteria of an addiction, I could not serve them. And so,
Right.
for those people who are maybe in the earlier stages, this behavior is getting risky, but it's not quite full blown addiction.
Right.
I think harm reduction can be a really great spot for them to land.
Right. Which also seems very intuitive as far as like, let's not wait until things are the very worst and
Right.
then you qualify for treatment. If somebody's having that moment, like you just described, of maybe this is something that I want to look at, maybe this is worth changing a bit about, it sounds like that's a good place to come in and just kind of start exploring, hey, maybe this is something to look at.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. That those people can still receive care. They can still make changes in their behavior, and even for folks who maybe it's really full blown, that they can also receive that care, that
Right.
compassion, that respect, that harm reduction as a approach and a philosophy can offer.
When somebody comes in to meet with you kind of for the first, second appointment, what can they expect if they've sort of let on that this is something they want to look at? How is that going to unfold in those first few sessions?
Yeah, I really like to introduce harm reduction kind of like I'm introducing it now to them, as a lot of people aren't familiar with it. It's kind of an emerging way to approach treatment, and explain it. Explain why I really value this approach, why I think it could be beneficial to them, and then even say, hey, do you want to proceed with this? Because maybe they're like, no, I really want more like regimented treatment. I need the structure, I need the accountability. Okay, then we don't use harm reduction, we use other methods.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just kind of my work as a clinician of really prioritizing the client's experience. They're the expert in their lives. And while I can advertise harm reduction all day and really say this could be a beneficial approach for you, at the end of the day, they're in charge of that even. So
Right.
that would be kind of how I end things with clients when I'm introducing
Sure.
this.
Is there anything kind of about, I know you mentioned at the very beginning how you maybe have your own story or part of this that brought you into this work? Because I think a lot of times we have, and obviously you don't have to share anything you don't want to share, but like what drew you to this work?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly look back to some of those experiences I had when I was in an inpatient unit providing care. Um, and I think a lot of times I felt really disillusioned that like this was working for folks because people were dying. Um,
Mm,
and just as, as a clinician, but more so as a human being, that's really, really hard, to see someone that, I'd served in treatment 10 times. They'd come to us 12
right.
times. I saw them 3 months prior and they're back again. It just kind of felt like, gosh, this isn't doing what it says it is.
Yeah.
Um, and so I really was curious, and I wanted some other way to prevent just kind of this like cycling of people in and out of treatment that really wasn't effective
Hmm.
and was causing death. And
Right.
so when harm
Yeah.
reduction like was presented to me, I was like, oh my God, yes, this is what I've been looking for.
Yeah. This makes a lot of sense. Gosh, it's really hard to see people that you've been working with not make it and know that there could be, or maybe hope that there could be a different way to approach things.
Right.
Um, you said something in there that I think is really key is, and I've heard you say this in other conversations about like that the relapse is just part of it. And so that feels like something that family members, that loved ones, that somebody doesn't go to treatment for them. I mean, I don't know what the stats are, but somebody doesn't go to treatment once and they're like, great, done, solved. Um, so I think kind of driving that home for both clients and their people in their lives, that this isn't going to be like a quick fix. You get sober for some time and then you're in the clear. So
Right.
that reminder.
Yeah, different substances have different relapse rates. There's quite a bit of research on that. I wish I could remember some of the statistics now. Um, but when we look at even just diagnosing addictions, one of the things that you have to, one of the diagnostic criteria is repeated relapse, attempts
Oh,
to be sober that are unsuccessful. And so
mm-hmm.
the fact that that's part of the diagnosis, that is something we expect to see. You must be
Yeah.
experiencing in order to receive this diagnosis. I just don't think people are aware of that, especially in like the
Yeah.
non-clinical setting.
Sure.
And that's why we have such harmful narratives about relapse versus saying like this is part of it. This is not
Mm-hmm.
something you get to negotiate out of. And I think
Right.
that saying that can be really like relieving for the person who's relapsing, because then it's like, okay,
Yeah.
this is part of the disease, this is something that's expected, this is something I don't get to opt out of, it's something I need to
Mm-hmm.
learn how to navigate, it's something that I need tools for. Feels a lot more like respectful of them and not like blaming,
Absolutely.
shaming, that kind of thing.
Right. It's not just like a ultimate failure because you relapsed. It's like, no, this is part of the process and we expect it and we
Exactly.
will figure out how to navigate it and how to get your family support and all those things.
Right, exactly.
All right. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap it up? Any last thoughts or, how does somebody start this process or anything else you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I guess just in summary, like harm reduction, it meets you where you're at. It's not a set goal. For people that are looking for this form of treatment, really try to find a provider that has this training, has this experience. And for people, clinicians who are more curious about this, are interested in that training, I really highly recommend the Missouri Credentialing Board Harm Reduction Specialist training. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
a really great tool. It's something that I use almost daily with folks.
That's cool. Thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me also. Much appreciated.
Yeah. Thanks so
All
much.
right. Thanks.